오늘은 지난번에도 소개를 잠깐 시켜드렸는데 이 뒤에 이분 두 번이나 투어 데 프랑스를 우승시킨 설명하는 것조차가 식상하지 않을까 싶습니다. 댓글 중에 많은 분들은 아니지만 제 채널이 워낙에 영세하기 때문에 그 조그만 댓글 중에서도 해외에 있는 좋은 영상들 가져다가 번역을 해서 소개를 시켜주면 어떻겠냐는 분들이 많진 않았어요. 이렇게 주제들이 댓글의 주제들이 너무 분산되다 보니까 이렇게 댓글이 많으면 그 중에서 이렇게 한 10% 20%라도 이렇게 모이는 게 있을 텐데 너무 다 이렇게 흐트러져 있어. 그렇기 때문에 제가 그런 이제 댓글의 직접적인 반영은 차차 하겠습니다. 그렇지만 아무튼 이런 것들이 몇 개 있었어요. 그래서 준비를 했습니다. 그리고 두 번째는 제 개인적으로 너무 좋았고 몇 번이고 돌려서 봤고 이게 30분짜리 인터뷰였습니다. 그리고 투어 데 프랑스 바로 전에 했던 인터뷰였고 지금은 한참 지났죠. 그리고 또 오프 시즌이죠. 별로 관심이 없을 수 있어. 그렇지만 그래도 재밌습니다. 열심히 여기 다 해놨어요. 요거 안 되는 영어를 다 들어가면서 사전 찾아가면서 위키피디아 같은 거 찾아가면서 이렇게 공부를 해서 다 이렇게 제가 잘못 번역한 부분들, 의역한 부분들 그런 거 좀 이해해 주시면서 보셨으면 좋지 않을까 싶습니다. GCN에서 했던 인터뷰고요. 설명란에다가 풀 영상 보실 수 있게 링크도 달아드리겠습니다. 본 영상 보러 가시죠.
And yeah, so there are a bunch of things that are important, at the physiological level. So one of the typical characteristics that someone like Tadej or any Tour de France contender has is a great lactate clearance capacity, fat oxidation capacity, and in general, great bioenergetics. They're very efficient metabolically speaking. A pizza without tomato sauce is not a pizza. Pizza needs a tomato sauce. Right, then the ingredients make the difference, right? But if you don't have a tomato sauce, you don't have a pizza. So that's kind of a minimum requirement that you need, a very good metabolic function to start with, and then you need to train that.
Where I can put my anchor down.
Like to talk about training, I always like to imagine things at the cellular level, right? What are the pathways that are stimulated, right? So yeah, what it used to be called more the aerobic pathway, now is the oxidative pathway where you burn fat very efficiently. So that means that during the race, you travel through burning a lot more fat than carbohydrates. That means that you preserve more glycogen towards the end of the race, and therefore you're going to have more energy. On the other hand, you need to have a very good lactate clearance capacity because when you deploy the turbo, which is the high intensity during a climb or a time trial, you need to recycle it very fast, the lactate. And you recycle it from the fast twitch muscle fibers in the slow twitch muscle fibers. And that's why you need to have a very robust mitochondrial function. So those two energy systems, they need to be stimulated and they're key for performance of these athletes. First, there's a calendar. With that calendar, we have the goals, the training program, including altitude training camps. Our philosophy is not to go to races just to get miles or kilometers, right? Our philosophy is to go to the races to win. He will never go to a race just to hang out and ride. So that's why, we really need to calculate. We need to pick as much as we can. So for that, we need to be careful how we choose the calendar, how we choose the time in between races, how we choose the training camps at altitude, and how we choose also the specific training systems that we want to stimulate. The day that the season finishes, we already thinking, right, about next year. We already thinking about today's program for next year. For us, it is. Altitude gives you a lot of benefits. It increases hemoglobin, which is oxygen carrying capacity, stimulated by hypoxia. It increases red blood cell production, therefore oxygen carrying capacity, and it also increases angiogenesis, which is the production of new vessels, right? So when you're at altitude, you have those two things happening at the same time. When you come back to sea level, you have that benefit. and it lasts about 3 weeks, something like that. That's why it's very important to do altitude training camps. But also they're very tricky, and you can come destroyed from altitude training camps. As more people go to altitude, we're going to see, we've seen already that it works very well for others, but it doesn't work very well for others. That's what we're trying to monitor as much as we can. So yeah, that's a good question. So it depends. We have, I like to say maybe more 3 main types of training. One day is like what I call that zone 2, right? Where you stimulate that oxidative capacity and that mitochondrial function and fat oxidation. The other thing is absolutely key is to improve the glycolytic capacity, which is, if you will, call it like the zone 4 or lactate threshold. We do a lot of that training, which is absolutely key because that's how you win races. And then the third absolutely key day is recovery, which is very, very important. So that recovery can be an off day completely or a coffee ride. There are riders who really appreciate an off day and just want to sleep in and lay down the whole day and do nothing, right? And other ones, they like to get together with their friends and go for a coffee ride or a coffee shop, right? It depends. It's not training easy, right? It's especially at this level. It's high intensity. For most mortals, that zone 2 might be sustainable for only 5 minutes, whereas for these guys, it's sustainable for 5 hours. It's not a ride in the park, right? So that's why, at least, we try not to do many hours because it can get very tasking. You get a lot more benefit from even doing 4 hours at your zone 2 by yourself than by doing 7 hours or 8 hours with a group. Depends on the time of the season too. You have the classics, or you have the Tour de France, where you have longer stages. So we might do longer rides. But all other times of the season, we don't need to do 6 hours, for example, or 6.5. 4.5, for example, at the right intensity is probably pretty good. That's a great question, and starting with genetics, right? Let's say you have very good genes to win the Tour de France. But the fact that you have those genes doesn't mean that you're going to win the Tour de France. If we were just by the genes, whoever has the best genes wins the Tour de France, right? Genetics is the science of probability, and it's a long journey until that protein is formed and that biological happen. It's about 20% probability. For you to stimulate, right, and express the right genes, you need to do the right stimulus, right? So this is where training is important. Nutrition is important, recovery is important, your mindset is very important. It's what we call epigenetics, everything that happens around the genes. And sometimes you might have, and I've seen riders with incredible genetic potential, but they're not pressing the right buttons, right? And therefore they're not expressing the genes correctly into that ultimate biological action, which might be going at 6.5 watts per kilogram up in Alpe d'Huez, for example, right?
Yeah.
Finding the right potential of an athlete and then finding the strong and the weak points and where we can improve those expression to clear lactate, for example. And but we might say that athlete is very good at that, but is very bad at the glycolytic capacity, the turbo.
Yeah.
So we really need to push that system. Or maybe it's the other way around. There's Peter Drucker. He's the father of modern, microeconomics. He came up with this phrase that many people have heard about, is that what gets measured gets managed. So we need to measure in order to manage. So this is what, at least this is always my obsession, to measure, so then we can manage. And in this case, with athletes, improve their performance. The generation of the new cyclists, they're more prepared. I remember when I was a bike rider and when we were 15, we didn't have nutrition, we didn't do physiological testing, we didn't have guidance. Heart rate monitors, they just came out to the market. So they start really optimizing their resources at a much earlier age. And those 4 or 5 years, they're very important in their development. When they turn 19 or 20, they're really more mature than when they were 19 and, I'm going to start training seriously. right? And that's when they will start peaking when they're 24, 25, right? I think this could be one of the reasons, but also the cycling itself has evolved tremendously. You have training, you have nutrition, you have biomechanics, you have monitoring, you have psychology. So all these pieces, they have to coexist together to the benefit of the athlete. Biomechanics, for example, is a key thing that, like before, who didn't have tendonitis, right? Now, who has tendonitis? So all cyclists now, they have very, very serious biomechanics testing, and not just to prevent injuries, but to improve the efficiency. Then we have materials, huge improvement in the last 5 years, in wheels, in frames, right, in TT bikes, right? So that's elevating things a lot too. Nutrition has been another area where, up until recently, the guidelines for carbohydrate intakes were 30 to 55 grams per hour. I don't think that could be the right ones. I think that we're more into 80 to 100 grams per hour. Back in the days, it was a crazy idea. A lot of criticism for that. We're talking about 2 to 3 times the fuel that cyclists used to have 10, 15 years ago. To me, it's been one of the most important advances that a cyclist has 2 to 3 times more fuel by the end of the race and can deploy the turbo better than before. Individualized nutrition. The recovery day, another day is like a more oxidative day for mitochondrial function, another day is glycolytic day. Each training day requires different nutrition. The amounts of carbohydrates and fat and protein and calories total they need to have. We've been having a lot of disorder, but I think that if you explain things very well and they get to buy in, they can really, and they see their improvement. That's a good question. I don't know. The first thing that comes to my mind is that to really go out there and give your best. Athletes are a good vehicle to inspire others, not just to try to pursue goals in all the things in life. I always say that a beauty for many people watching the Tour de France is that those are inspiration for many others. Also, the sacrifice that others do, that might be inspiration for someone to pursue goals. But I think also a very important thing that a lot of people go out there and ride, because it's a beautiful sport and it's great for your health and for your mind. I think it gets a lot of people excited, like buy a bike, get a helmet, clothes on, and go out there and ride. And in the moment they get in there, they know it's good for their health and for their mind. That's the first thing that comes to my mind.